November 1990. The earth movers were churning up a rich mixture of mud and optimism in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. The Westray project marked the revival of a coal economy that first started here almost 2 centuries ago. It promised a shot of long-term prosperity from the extraction of up to 50 million tons of high-quality coal. Westray manager Gerald Phillips predicted a long and lustrous future.
We're developing the mine to be here for many years. We've got a 15-year contract and we plan to be around for 25, 30 years. So we want to drive the tunnel so you never have to go back and do any maintenance work.
At approximately 5:20 a.m. local time this morning, what appears to be a very significant explosion occurred in the underground operations at the Westray Coal Mine in Plymouth, Pictou County, Nova Scotia. At the time of the explosion, there were 26 employees underground working on the night shift.
In a few seconds on the morning of May 9th, 1992, the optimism turned to anguish and anger.
This has been described as an act of God.
Act of the devil, maybe. It was never an act of God. It wasn't an act of God. God didn't leave that coal dust laying around.
It took 12 years to bring the Westray Mine from speculation to reality, and part of the reason was because a lot of people in the mining business didn't think this was a very good place for a coal mine. The geology is dangerous and the economics were high risk. But all the technical misgivings were offset by a factor that gained importance as time passed: politics. The mine was supposed to be a strictly private sector project, but the private sector backed away finally in 1987, so a group of Nova Scotia politicians approached a mining promoter with strong Tory connections and a talent for extracting money from governments. His name was Clifford Frame, and his company was Curragh Resources.
Well, how do you account for the fact that so many people that know you and a lot of people who like you in the mining business have begun to characterize you as a guy whose chief specialty is getting money out of government people?
I'd say that's quite a compliment, because it must mean that they can't get it.
Curragh, to my knowledge, has no coal mining or underground coal mining expertise.
Derek Rance, then chairman of the Cape Breton Development Corporation, the federal agency that ran most of the Nova Scotia coal industry, opposed the project. One of his big concerns was safety.
There's no question about the fact that when you're mining in a gassy mine, you have to be extremely careful, and safety becomes paramount.
In September 1987, Rance called on one of Nova Scotia's pro-mining politicians, Federal Revenue Minister Elmer MacKay, who was also MP for Pictou County. They talked for 30 minutes, during which Rance warned MacKay of dangers lurking in the coal seam the politicians wanted Curragh to develop. MacKay took the safety warning under advisement. The Cape Breton Development Corporation later explicitly warned the federal and provincial governments, due to a complicated geological structure with numerous faults, its seams have given off large volumes of gas and proven extremely liable to spontaneous combustion. That warning, along with serious financial criticisms, found a receptive audience in the federal bureaucracy. The bureaucrats took a dim view of spending public money on a privately owned and operated coal mine in Pictou County. Back in Pictou County, the hostility to their new coal mine set a fire in the heather. Ron Marks was mayor of Stellarton, Pictou County in 1988.
The 5 mayors within Pictou County and the county warden put a lobby effort together to make a direct pitch in Ottawa.
And in Ottawa, they went all the way to the top, to an old friend and former Pictou MP, Brian Mulrooney. And they were accompanied by 2 of their senior politicians, Elmer MacKay and their provincial member, Donald Cameron.
As I recall, he was very supportive of our plans to have this locate within Pictou County, and he said he would meet with his people to see if there's anything that they could do to speed this along.
I've never heard of a municipal politician from the Maritimes getting that kind of hearing from the Prime Minister for a project like this? What was special about Pictou?
Well, we had a special rapport, I think, with the Prime Minister. When he was first elected leader of the Conservative Party, he ran in Central Nova, and the people within Pictou County gave him a very large mandate.
It wasn't long before the bureaucratic obstacles just melted away. The Westray Mine was becoming a reality.
Will the Premier now recognize that he had invested so much political capital by announcing it 2 days before the election?
With the direct involvement of Tory politicians, Westray became not just a coal mine, but a political minefield. Bernie Boudreau is a provincial Liberal politician from Cape Breton.
The mine was a political project from the beginning. It received its push from Donald Cameron, and that's what kept it going all the way along.
November 1990, the Fifth Estate began taping an investigative report on the Westray project. Coincidentally, Donald Cameron, who was then Nova Scotia's industry minister, was running for the leadership of the provincial Tory party, a position which would also bestow the title of Premier. Cameron didn't appreciate the attention.
So the sleaze bags are out, and they call Fifth Estate and they tell them that Don Cameron's down here giving contracts out to the coal mine, to friends, and you better come out and check it out.
One of the alleged sleazebags was Bernie Boudreau, the Liberal MLA.
I received a phone call at home late one evening from the Premier, and he was extremely upset.
In this affidavit, sworn by Boudreau the next day, he says Cameron warned him, "You had better have been perfect all your life because we're investigating your background, and when we get what we need, you won't like it."
I think the most alarming part was a suggestion by the Premier that having checked my background, if there was nothing in it which would be of use to them in a counterattack, if you will, then perhaps they might just make up something and float it, and then have me deny it. I think and I assumed that the Premier was very upset at that point and didn't mean what he was saying.
In spite of the controversy, Westray was producing coal by the summer of 1991, ahead of schedule, the promoters said, and under budget. They boasted state-of-the-art safety, and last September there was a gala official opening.
This is a top-notch plant.
Donald Cameron was there. He'd become Premier. But even in the moment of celebration, there was room for one tiny recrimination.
This is a project that is a symbol of what happens far too often in our problems in our country, is when politics gets in the way of good things happening.
In the fall of '91, Westray was a political triumph, vindication for a lot of politicians who had gone out on various limbs to make it happen. It wasn't producing a lot of coal, and the stuff that was coming up wasn't nearly as fabulous as it was supposed to be. But that was just a matter of time. From a political perspective, up here in the fresh air, Westray was a winner. But from a different perspective, that of the men working down below, it was another picture entirely. Working conditions underground were more unstable than anyone had projected. So unstable, many workmen were afraid for their lives. Equipment operator Gordon Walsh.
I don't think any other job I ever had. I went to work wondering whether I was going to come home that night. And many times I had that feeling.
Sean Comish, miner.
It was a job, paid my bills, scared to death the whole time I was there.
Lenny Bonner, miner.
The dangers, constant dangers, stress, it was just unreal, eh? Every day you go in, it was wondering whether you're going to make it out alive, or if you're going to get hit with a rock fall, or if you're going to get blown up, or it's crazy.
These men are installing rock bolts, basically fasteners to keep the overhead from falling on top of them. Frequent and unexpected rock falls were a major complaint of Westray miners.
Our first shift underground, we were on a bolting machine, well, just helpers like on the bolting machine, and we were pulling some screen down the slope, and all of a sudden The roof comes in, all kinds of dust. All we seen was two little dim lights down in the dust telling us to go back. That was our first experience at Westray. And from there it just got worse.
There was 4 or 5 of us working together, and rock started falling a lot beside us, and so we jumped off the scoop. We were working on a scoop and trying to get the steel beam in place for an extra support. And we jumped off the scoop, and a whole bunch of rock come down, and everybody just disappeared in the dust.
They hollered into us, like, you know, hey, get off the bolter. And my partner, he never understood what he said, and he said, what did you say? And he said, you know, get off the fucking bolter. So we were gone in a flash, and we stood at the back of the bolter for a couple of minutes maybe, and a gust of wind come around the corner and a dust storm. You know, a large portion of the roof had fallen, and after we stood around and talked about it for a little while, you know, the boss said, well, geez, don't just stand there, you know, get back to fucking work.
It's quite a thing to watch steel I-beams being driven down, flattened, and listening to the banging of the rock.
While workers describe frequent rock falls, curiously, government inspection reports up to November last year only reported 7 such incidents. Westray management hired an engineering company to review the situation last summer. But according to Ray Savage, an underground surveyor who quit Westray in a dispute over safety conditions, there was only one effective way to deal with the problem.
I firmly believe that the only way you could successfully advance those roadways, to maintain the roadways, is that for every 5 feet of advance, a steel arch would be set in place. In other words, it would be a tunnel which was arched with steel. And I was told that economically it's not feasible, and there would be no mine if that took place.
As the miners drove the main mine tunnels toward the rich coal deposit deep in the Ford seam, Westray management targeted the earliest possible coal production. It was a lower quality section, higher in the seam. It was called the Southwest Block. Miners say that ground conditions quickly deteriorated.
The whole section went to shit in 4 days. On our 4 days off, we came back, it was closed down. Like, that's a lot of roads and a lot of intersections. It all got heavy, it all started caving in within our 4 days back. It was all caving in. They should have just forgot all about that southwest section and just concentrated on the North Mains, moving down to where their objective was supposed to be at.
Eventually, they established steady production in the southwest section, but as they did, they encountered more serious problems, this time with methane gas.
We went up there on a scoop. I was driving the scoop. I should have never done it. But I said, you know, how's the gas? Oh, it's pretty close, around 5%. I said, well, the scoop, it's going to shut down. He said, don't worry, it won't shut down. And later on, I found out that they had somebody disconnected so that it wouldn't shut down.
What does 5% methane mean?
Well, that's explosive range.
So you're driving a machine through an air mass that is literally ready to go boom.
Yes. Yep.
Even with the southwest section producing coal and mining underway in 2 other sectors near the rich main block, output fell far short of projections and quality was disappointing. At the same time, Curragh Resources was experiencing serious financial problems which would have a profound impact on the new Westray Coal Mine. Westray's production problems gradually took on political significance. Poor quality and missed delivery commitments looked bad for people who had raised high public expectations for the new mine. More ominously, for the people at Curragh Resources, the little mine that was supposed to be a big new financial asset was beginning to look like a big new liability. And as the political and financial stakes increased, miners began to feel increasing pressure to make painful and ultimately tragic trade-offs. Tom Reed, miner.
Well, I started looking for another job while I was still at Westray, but the reason I started looking was because I felt the mine was unsafe. I don't think the company or the government were taking proper steps to enforce safety there.
Reed is a mine safety expert with supervisor's papers, and he was particularly horrified by the underground use of tractors that had unprotected electrical and exhaust systems.
I remember Chester Ty had said on an interview that CBC had done with him, he was talking about sparks shooting out of the muffler. Well, that was me driving that tractor. And when I seen that, and coal dust can ignite just like that, when I seen that, and there was 2 feet of dust on the floor, I hit that there kill switch off that tractor and I jumped off and I was vibrating from my head to my toe. And I said, listen buddy, if you ever learned anything, you better get out of here as soon as you can.
What is this? What is all this?
Basically, it's 165 pounds of paper.
Back in 1987, when the politicians were looking for someone to develop the Pictou County mine, David Rose was part of a Cape Breton-based consortium that wanted to do it with British partners. His bid was rejected, but he still believes the mine could have been brought safely to production, that the tragedy was preventable.
Safety begins not just underground. It begins with senior management and the commitment that they give to it. That's basically it. And it can't work unless they have it, unless they're supported and prepared to put the dollars in place to do that and make it a commitment, because even men will breach the safety factors themselves. But our responsibility was not to let that happen. We never underestimated a coal mine. Only fools would do that.
Example, this conveyor belt carried coal out of the mine through a tunnel which also vents explosive gases. In many jurisdictions, this is forbidden. Example, miners complained that these rock bolting machines were not equipped with instruments for monitoring methane levels in the air. Example, for at least 10 months, provincial labor officials held polite discussions with Westray officials about the need for proper control of coal dust in the mine.
The dust?
Yeah.
Sean Comish.
It's just buildup. It's built up on the roadways. It'd be built up, it'd be over your boots. It's like walking on the moon. You could take a week to clean up the coal dust, and you still wouldn't get it done. And that was the problem. They wanted nothing to do with slowing down. Now, I've heard since they were running behind production and stuff like that. I can believe it. We were a real good gravel bed, not too good on the coal.
This is limestone. You grind it up to a powder and use it to control coal dust, which is highly explosive. The law is specific and stringent. It requires that coal dust be saturated with limestone dust until it becomes inert. Properly applied, it usually prevents coal dust explosions. Westray bought its stone dust from this company, about 250 tons since it started coal production, a fraction of what they might have been expected to use in that time. Lenny Bonner was on the mine safety committee and was at Westray for over a year.
The only time I ever seen rock dusting done, other than the odd time, was when an inspector would come in, or somebody would be coming in to tour the mine, somebody of importance, maybe bankers or somebody from their head office or whatnot, hire company officials. Anytime there was a major visit, there would definitely be rock dusting, and they would water down the slope and the main road and stuff like that, but that's the only time I've ever seen it done.
Provincial mine inspectors visited Westray at least 49 times. Documents show they commented on coal dust at least 4 times. The last time was April 29th.
What was the attitude towards the government presence, the mine inspection crowd?
Mine inspectors? Go for a cakewalk, go home. You know, and I don't know that it was their fault. Somebody's turning thumb screws somewhere. Now, he's got to live too. He's got to feed his family, but now he's got to live with something that I'm glad I don't have to live with.
For some miners, working at Westray became a waiting game, waiting for conditions to improve and hoping to survive the wait. Tom Reed.
What did Westray mean to you when you first saw the prospect of working there? How important was this to you and to your family?
Well, it meant a shot at staying home for 15 years in Nova Scotia and having a permanent job and never have to go away from home and leave my family for 3 months at a time or 2 months or 6 months or whatever again. That's what it meant. I seen a future in it, you know, until I got underground.
Tom Reed quit Westray January 26th. He's waiting for a call to a mining job in Chile. Miles Gillis didn't quit, though he'd had a premonition that he might die and where it might happen. His wife Isabel remembers.
He told my brother that he figured that he predicted that there was definitely something like this was going to happen. He didn't know when, it was just a matter of time. And he said if, you know, of course he was hoping I won't be on that shift when it happens, but if it did, if he was on that shift, he said it would probably happen in here in the southwest section. And he was saying, I just pray to God that when it happens, if I'm on the shift, that I can get out here. And he figured he would be hurt, but somehow he would, you know, straggle himself out of the mine and he would be okay. But he said, like, if it happened here, whoever would be in behind him working, there would be no hope.
He actually singled out the southwest section, which is where he eventually died. How long before the accident did this happen?
Good Friday.
On Good Friday?
Good Friday, he took the map out and he was showing it.
8 p.m., May 8th, the last shift change at Westray. Lenny Bonner had just finished 12 hours on a rock bolter in the southwest section, and he wasn't happy with what he saw there.
I noticed it was getting pretty hot, and I looked and I seen the vent tubing blocked off. I asked the guy working with me, why is that? He said, well, the mining crew, you know, they got that blocked off so they don't gas out.
So that like the vent tubing is a great big suction pipe,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
To take gas away.
Yeah.
So they block it off, so you'll get more
suction in the other workplace.
Over where they're cutting coal.
Yeah.
It was apparently a common practice, but a life-and-death gamble on that shift. The rock bolter wasn't equipped to read methane levels, and the methanometer on the coal-cutting machine wasn't working.
We unhooked the ventilation stopping that was on there, and about 15 minutes or so had passed, and our foreman had come in, and the guy I was working with asked him to do a gas check, and he had 3.75, and it dropped while he was standing there to about 3.5.
Is that a lot?
But it was, yeah, that's a lot, yeah.
At 5:19 Saturday morning, as the 26 men from Westray's B crew looked forward to the end of their shift, a massive explosion tore the mine apart.
So right away you said the dust.
No, right away I said the men. My friends.
When I heard this accident happen, it just horrified me. I couldn't believe that the company let it go so far. I just couldn't believe it.
The captain told me to stay back and another fellow to stay back. And 3 of them went down to put them in the bags. He knew because I would be emotional, because I knew them. And he was right, I was. I mean, I could see what they were doing. And you know, you can't wipe tears out of your eyes when you got a face mask on. It was bad.
From what I seen when I looked onto the number 2 side on the belt road, everything was completely destroyed. Like almost unrecognizable.
Right up to the surface?
Right up to the surface.
For Lenny Bonner and Sean Comish, there's no doubt where the blast was triggered, the southwest section of the mine.
Perhaps the vent tubing was blocked, and the guys are in there bolting. The miners at the other face mining. The methane would build. The guy tightens a bolt, and it's game over. One spark. The methane would ignite. There wouldn't be enough methane there to blow that mine apart like that. I mean, the methane would ignite, and it would be the coal dust that did the rest. You'll never convince me that there was that much methane in that mine, and if there was, what were the men doing in there?
Consultant David Rose.
Mine inspectors, in this is a coal mining province. How can you possibly explain such a breakdown in the vigilance?
That was a hard one, But I don't really believe the inspectors perhaps were free agents in this case. Maybe they were intimidated because it was so, this mine is so political that there would be overtones that would cause a mitigation of responsibilities.
That's no excuse for an inspector to say, I know, but I'm afraid to close it down.
No, I'm afraid not. The Act says you can close it down. You know, if I was an inspector, I would have closed it down, and if my superiors wanted to forego the safety standards, then they accept responsibility. I would not accept that responsibility for no person or how much money if I was an inspector. No way. No, I have a conscience, I couldn't do that. I would be intrepid enough to let the shit hit the fan, basically.
Early on, this was described as an act of God. How did you react?
Criminal negligence. That's what I believe.
Leroy Legere is Nova Scotia Minister of Labour. How many visits would it take, though? Miners have described fairly conspicuous dust conditions up over their ankles, all very obvious even to the layperson's eyes. And yet it seems that the inspectors didn't take it seriously enough to act.
Well, I can't speak for the inspectors. I've looked at the inspection reports. At no time did I see any of those serious allegations that some people are making today. I've spoken to my inspectors. They indicate that on every occasion when they go down the mine, they stopped and spoke to the miners. They would ask them if there was any concern. I don't know time when, during those visits, did anyone ever indicate that they had a concern for safety or for special safety areas in that mine.
How much personal responsibility do you feel for the deaths of 26 people in Westray Mine?
At this time, I feel no personal responsibility. I certainly feel a sense of grief, a sense of questions to be answered. I'm certain to a point that we've carried out in the department the best procedures that we could.
Is your job on the line? Is the government's integrity on the line over this?
I don't believe that at all. I've carried out my duties to the best of my ability. I feel confident that we haven't in any way been negligent. Some people will question my political judgments, but that's politics. But as far as responsibilities with the department, I feel that there will be nothing found there that will lead to anyone suggesting that we were not doing our job.
Ron Marks is the former mayor of Stellarton, an original supporter of the Westray Mine.
Certainly this was a tragedy, and it has affected everyone in Pictou County. But we look at the Challenger disaster, and they still go into space. And we look at the Titanic, and people still go to sea. I think the mine still has a lot of potential, and I would encourage who's ever in those positions of power to try to put the mine back into service again.
Would you go back to Westray Mine?
I don't think I'd ever go back in that mine. I don't think so.
Danger or memory or what? What's the...
Both. Really. I don't walk through graveyards. I'm sure as hell not going to go down there.